Hi, I'm Doris Purchase, and welcome to Beyond the Frame, a podcast created just for you by Propeller Art Gallery, artists empowering artists in Toronto. Together, we'll take a deep dive into the hearts and minds of working visual artists today and their practice. In each episode, you will hear illuminating and intimate explorations of all things art, and you'll hear it in the artist's own voice. We'll talk process, inspiration, challenges, and much more. Everything you've ever wanted to know about art making or about the artists themselves happens right here. So let's sit back and have a listen, shall we? Today we welcome Lauri Maitland. Which ism is it? Under which ism would you classify your work?
My art definitely leans towards realism. I like the feeling of creating what I see, of following the lines and the colors that already exist and replicating them in my own way. I don't aim for photorealism. I like the freedom to ignore or change in a picture what doesn't speak to me, and I don't want to feel so tightly bound that I have to place a line exactly where it originally existed. But I find comfort in painting a scene or a person's expression that has brought me happiness, as if I'm trying to preserve it for a moment for later.
Who's your muse? Influencers, educators, mentors? Who has greatly inspired you?
I don't know that I have any one person that's my muse. I take inspiration from observing. I like to walk in the city or go for a hike or sit on a bench and just watch. Watch how people interact, how the light hits a building or shimmers off a window. For me, it's important to stop and just be for a while, to take in the environment around me, and that's what becomes my source of inspiration and my creative energy.
Materials matter. What are your chosen favorite tools and preferred medium?
My main material is glass, and most of the glass I use is hand-rolled. So I feel like I'm taking over where another artist has left off. And the glass has a life of its own. It interacts with the light and the enamels in a way that canvas never could. I take a scene, I break it down to its components and the planes that they live on, and then recreate it in a multiple panel structure that when stacked together, once again tells the original story. Once painted and stacked, those panels go into a kiln so that the glass can fuse into one solid block with the picture trapped inside. It's almost if you had frozen it in a block of ice. My work is really a partnership, as once I place the panels in the kiln, my control over the process is limited. I can set the right temperature for the right amount of time, but how the enamels react and what the glass does is up to science and a little luck. Opening the kiln is always like Christmas morning, and although it's not exactly what I wanted or envisioned sometimes, the end product is a collaboration between the original artist that created the glass, myself having transformed it, and the glass itself once again finding a stable state.
Slump secrets. What methods do you employ to get yourself out of a slump?
I would love to say I never am in a slump, but that is a huge exaggeration. Sometimes I'm just not creative. I don't have anything to share. At that point, I go back to the love of just doing. I draw or paint, not for the end product, but for the pleasure of feeling the way the paint moves with the brushes and slides across the glass, or how charcoal smudges into the paper. I don't create, I play, with a full intention of throwing it out when I'm done. Not every piece is a masterpiece. Not every piece even sees the light of day. But the pressure sometimes to make something sellable or something amazing can block your creativity. So I give myself the opportunity to create nothing.
In the beginning. So tell me a bit about your process. Do you have a bag of tricks, lucky talismans, or habits? Where do you start? And more importantly, when do you stop?
I'm a little ritualistic when I start to paint. I like having essential oils going and music playing. I always take a moment when I enter my studio to organize my space so that I have time to get my head in the game. As a multi-layer glass artist, I spend a lot of time planning a piece. I do a lot of moving and shifting of elements. I always sketch out the process first before starting so that I have a sense of familiarity with what I'm going to do. I create a plan on where things are going to go and how they're going to fit together, on the number of layers and what will reside on each one. And I also have to know how I want a piece to be viewed before I start. So will it be hung? Will it be in a stand? Will it be viewed from one side or both? All of this has to be decided before paint ever hits the glass. I'd say I spend almost as long preparing a piece as I do painting it. Stopping is easy, though. At a certain point, a piece is just done. I can't see where else to go or what else I could do to make it better. And I know that if I work past this point, I'm going to regret it and feel I've taken away more than I've added. So I trust my instincts and stop. But I'm only one half of the equation. After I've planned and painted, it still has to go into the kiln. And as I've said before, although I have to do my best in the process of controlling the elements of heat and glass and time, they interact on their own in a way that determines what the end product will look like. So part of stopping for me is giving up ownership of the piece and letting it become what it will.
Calling all emo. What do you wish people to think or feel when they contemplate your work?
Familiarity. I want people to feel connected, like they've been in the scene before, like they know the experience, whether it's walking down the street or standing on a bridge. I hope they get an emotional reaction to my work. We all go a million miles, and we miss so much of what's going on around us. So if my pieces make them take a minute to enjoy and appreciate what maybe they walked past prior, then that's what I'm aiming for. Because I lean towards realism, there's not a lot of room for interpretation on what you're seeing. I've made it fairly clear what the painting is. But what the viewer brings to it is the memory or feeling it may evoke. I recently did a series on old buildings and items that had been discarded. And for me, this series was almost sad, as it echoed our society's disposable way of life. So the picture of an old wagon wheel is obviously an old wagon wheel, but it gives you the opportunity to see it differently, to see the beauty of its weathered condition, appreciate the time it has existed, and that's the kind of contemplation I want people to experience when they see my work.
The struggle is real. Talk to me about your biggest challenges as an artist. What methods do you use to overcome these challenges?
Biggest challenge is probably criticism, and I know that's not the favorable answer, but it's true. As an artist, I put a piece of me in all of the works that I do, and I have a connection to each piece. And people will say, you can't take it personally, you have to get a tough skin, but I'm not sure I agree. I think the point of being an artist, whether it's visual or music or writing, is opening yourself up and sharing something vulnerable through your work. That's what keeps the love of your craft alive and what makes you want to create. And otherwise, you're just producing. So criticism definitely affects me, and the way I meet the challenge is to accept it. Take it in. I wallow a little bit from time to time, and then I move on. And I hope that the more I share my work, the more of a connection I'm creating between myself and the people around me.
Picture perfect. In your opinion, what constitutes a perfect piece of art? And what qualities in your own work would you signify as a perfect work? For example, perfect composition, confident brushstrokes illustrating a concept, or something else altogether.
I don't aim for perfect. I'm not sure I know what perfect is. I aim for better. I hope to be a better artist tomorrow, next week, next year than I am today. And I really look for progress in my work. I like to look back and see how my work has changed and shifted over time. I think if there is such a thing as reaching perfection, I'm not sure where you would go after that. I'm looking for a way, though, to take my work to the next step, to do something in the next series that's different from the last one. I make it a rule to never paint the same thing twice, and I like each series to be very distinctive.
Art Speak. How do you feel about titling, discussing, and explaining your work?
I hate titling my work, and I am no good at it. And I'm always in awe of people who can come up with a creative name that exactly describes their work in like 3 words or less. But unfortunately, that is not my skill set. Discussing my work, on the other hand, I can do for hours. I love what I do. I love the process. I love the feel of the glass and the paints, and consider myself extremely lucky to be able to create in this way. So I have no trouble sharing my enthusiasm.
Heavy metal or classical? What do you listen to while you work? Or is silence your thing?
Music is always on in my studio, and it's almost always soothing, something easy to listen to, singer-songwriter type music, so that it's not a distraction, but a way of drowning out the exterior. I find that music helps get me into the zone, where you lose track of time and what's going on, and you're totally submersed in your work. But I also like to have essential oils going, so that all your senses are triggered. I make the time in my studio very different from other parts of my day. Like going to the office triggers muscle memory into work mode. Going to my studio, music on, sense going, triggers my head into a creative zone and helps to stop me from thinking of all the other things I have to do that day.
Why for art thou? Why do you make art?
Art for me is like yoga or meditation. It's an escape. It's a safe place where for a time I can block out the pressure and demands of real life and just exist. I'm naturally a very introverted person, so art for me is my way to connect with others and is a vehicle of self-expression and self-care. For me, painting is therapy. It helps keep me balanced and happy.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Frame, a PAG podcast. To hear more episodes and to view the artist's works, please visit www.propellerartgallery.ca. Hosted by Doris Purchase, produced by Tracy Thomson, and recorded at the Orange Lounge Studio in Toronto. Also, the Propeller Art Gallery recognizes the presence of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Huron-Wendat nations. We acknowledge we are hosted on land governed by Treaty 13, the Toronto Purchase, the Two-Row Wampum Treaty, and the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. We are committed to peaceably sharing and caring for the resources around the Great Lakes and operating the gallery on the principles of inclusiveness as we continue to exhibit art created by artists from all over the world. Thank you for listening.